I'm Joel McKelvey with the Looker product team here at Google Cloud. And today I'm going to talk about modern analytics and the modern data lake. This will be a quick conversation about the new way of thinking about analytics in a data lake, data warehouse environment, and a little bit of a discussion about the simplification of overall data infrastructure. So just to set the stage, we know that data is very important. As data specialists, which many of you are, we understand this value that data can bring to a business. But I think it's really important to note that in a time of disruption, financial markets disruption, a global pandemic, that data can really make a difference between success and failure for a business. Particularly in times of disruption, insights from data can help organizations survive or even thrive during change. And Forrester research found that they are more than 2.3 times more likely to succeed during disruption. So it's really important that we get data right as businesses, and that as data people, we help our organizations understand the value that they can receive from the data they have. So why doesn't every business do this? And I think from talking with a lot of data-driven businesses, the challenge really is with balancing the time spent on infrastructure and delivering what is currently available to the business every single day, and then innovating is very, very hard. This innovation versus infrastructure, innovation versus maintenance challenge is a really severe one for a lot of people. Most organizations I talk with are spending 60, 70, 80, even 90% of their time just trying to keep up with managing a data warehouse and a data lake and data extracts, and then managing ad hoc requests from users, requests for a new data extract, updated data sets that they can play with in, say, a spreadsheet program or something along those lines. A lot of time is spent just keeping those lights on, and that doesn't free up a lot of time to rethink how the data stack works, how data pipelines deliver data to users, or this whole life cycle of data from collection to consumption, which is really important to consider and to rethink. As data volumes get bigger, the importance of data becomes more important. We get more types of data from more sources in more ways, things like streaming data and sensor data. We're really challenged to figure out how to deal with what we need today and then meet these new opportunities for data in our businesses. And I think it's not because there's something wrong with us or we don't recognize the challenge, but rather that we're saddled with a lot of legacy systems or a legacy approach to how we do data and how we build a data stack. Now, I've got a diagram here that describes a relatively simplified version of a data stack. In reality, they tend to be far more complex than this, but they have all these stages, right? Data is collected, normally goes into something like a transactional database. From there, it might be transformed, or at least some data quality might occur before it gets moved to a data lake. From a data lake, it might be heavily transformed, moved into a warehouse. From a data warehouse, often it's transformed or aggregated, moved out into an operational data store, a data mart, an extract, or a cube. And then it's sent to individuals to do analysis. The business users tend to do that on their desktop. And they're working with a relatively limited, non-granular data set. And for the most part, they're looking at retrospective data, sometimes quite stale data, to try and answer very important questions about the present and the future. And so it limits us that there are all these stages because of the time it takes. It's also brittle and complex. It's hard to audit data where it came from, if there's a failure, where that failure happened. Troubleshooting can be a challenge. And this is all really because of the number of steps in our data pipelines between collection and consumption. And if you look at this diagram, it really does reflect a 70-30, and in some cases I see 80-20, 90-10 approach to data, where so many of the resources, so much of the investment is in collection and storage, and not nearly enough is around delivering that data to the business where it can have the most value. So I think it's really important to think about this legacy approach and its complexity and rethink it significantly to move forward. When you intellectually disassemble the current stack and you start grouping it into pieces, you really end up thinking about three components which are very, very important. Certainly the data at the time its collection is important, and certainly a user that consumes that is important. But in between it, there are three major steps. And these three fundamental concepts are of moving the data to where it can be analyzed, placing it in an analytic context so that you can analyze it and storing it there, and then an intelligence function or an analytics function that processes, consumes, analyzes the data, and puts it in the hands of users where and when they need it. When you're thinking about ELT versus ETL, and you're thinking about data transformation as it moves into a data warehouse or a data lake, you're often thinking about doing some very heavy work on that data traditionally, but it turns out you don't necessarily need to do that from a transformation perspective. What you really need to do is get the data from collection into a place where it can be analyzed, whether that's a data warehouse or a data lake. Inside that warehouse or lake, you need to, of course, be able to accommodate the volume of data you have. You should think about whether or not you're going to put it on the cloud or open source, or you're going to do it yourself. There's some really powerful cloud opportunities for data lakes and data warehouses that have arisen in the last few years. So I think that's a very important consideration to make. And then from a business intelligence or analytics perspective, you need to get the data where and when it's needed into the hands of the people who use it. And there's traditional ways of doing that, and we'll talk a little bit more about new ways that arise for getting data in the hands of users once you've managed to modernize your approach to your data stack overall. We know that data analysis and data stacks are a challenge because we hear a lot from organizations that they're shifting their spend in IT, shifting their spend in the data space. Where we saw people investing a few years ago on traditional querying environments, workbook-driven analytics, data extracts, there's been a real sea change in how people consume and use data. And now analytics are being integrated right into business operations, right into digital solutions. So where you might have before thought about delivering the best report or building the best dashboard, it turns out that some of the places where data can have the greatest impact are not reports and dashboards. And integrating into a more robust type of business operation digital solution environment can make a real difference. So how do you do that if you have all these challenges with getting the data from where it's created to where it can actually be consumed? And that's where a modern approach to both the data lake and the analytics environment comes in. So if you think a little bit about the changes in the ability to, say, query a data lake, I think this is probably our first big change. You can query data now as it exists in the data lake, relatively high performance, particularly when that data lake is in the cloud. It gives you a decent amount of performance, a decent amount of scalability, and it's led to this concept that I've heard called a lake house, or sort of a combination data warehouse, data lake type environment, where you can store incredibly vast amounts of data. You can process it once it's in there rather than having to do a lot of transformation before it enters into this data lake, data warehouse environment. So your ETL is highly simplified. You're essentially collecting that raw granular data, doing a minimal amount of transformation, loading it right into the data warehouse data lake. That is not brittle. It's much easier to audit, and it's also very legacy friendly. When I talk about this modern approach and this new way of thinking, you shouldn't think that, and some people brought this up, you shouldn't think that this means the systems that you have today have to be taken out to pasture or can no longer be used. The systems that you use today can feed into a modern data lake. They can feed into a modern data warehouse. But maybe you have a little bit more complex ETL, maybe you have a little bit more complex data loading as a result. That's okay. as you gradually move off of these more legacy approaches, you can easily transition over to a simpler, lower transformation burden as you put that more granular data into that queryable environment. Now, the other half of this is the concept of a better way of using queries and analytics to deliver data where it's needed. And really, we should be thinking about, at worst, 50-50, 50% of your time spent on getting the data to where it's queryable and usable, and the other 50 on delivering it to where it's needed in the business. So it's a shift, right? It's a shift from an infrastructure-focused world to an insight-focused data world. And part of that is a modern environment that leverages the modern data lake and the modern data warehouse. The architecture that allows you to deliver SQL queries via JDBC directly to that data storage lake or warehouse is very, very important, using the power of that modern technology to drive analytics. That lets you transform a lot less that's in the data lake, and instead transform on query, making it a lot more flexible and putting granular data into the hands of the analysts who need it. There needs to be some type of central semantic model as well that governs how you address that data and how you put it out to users in a way that unrestricts the questions that they can ask. So think about it this way. In an old environment where there was perhaps a data mart that you're giving to a department, let's say marketing, the marketing analyst would have access only to that very restricted set of data. That data might be relatively stale because it's had to go through a full data pipeline. And when they needed updated data in that data mart, they might have to request that from a data team. That takes time and can be complicated. Whereas in an environment that's got a modern data lake, data warehouse, and modern analytics, the data arrives in the lake warehouse, is modeled semantically, and is made available at the time it arrives in the warehouse directly to the users who need to consume it. And their questions are unrestricted. You haven't aggregated it unnecessarily. You haven't removed granularity. They have that data available to them right there. But a model or a semantic layer in between can help translate what is essentially volumes of machine-readable data into something that's very consumable by an end user. And that makes a big difference in the impact data can have in a business. We call these types of unrestricted questions, this ability to directly query highly granular data, even as a non-technical, non-SQL speaker user, we call those data experiences. Data experiences are essentially the way that people consume data in every way, and one of those ways is a traditional business intelligence reporting and dashboard environment. But the reality here, the key point here, is that people need data available to them in a way that works best for their way of working, in a way that makes the most sense for them at the time and place that they want to consume it. We have whole generations of people who are ready to consume data, but may not want to log in, for example, into an analytics environment. They might need it right in their workflow, right where they're going to have the most impact in their job as it exists. Maybe it's a mobile application for a food delivery person. Maybe it's a portal for an insurance agent. Maybe it's an internal environment or application that provides data out to make operations more efficient at a company. There are a lot of different ways that data experiences can move the business. Data experiences at their heart are a lot more than just reporting and dashboarding. And as we at Looker have polled and reached out to data companies and data teams around the world, we've decided to aggregate, or we've aggregated what we find in data experiences into 4 big groups. We see them fall naturally this way. Clearly, modern business intelligence and analytics is one of those groups. These are reports and dashboards and environments for data exploration that give people access to data in a very traditional way. Maybe it's delivered to them via email. But there are more ways to deliver a report than just email and in a formal report type environment. It might be that you want to integrate insights into other ways that people communicate and use data. For example, with Looker, we have a Looker bot that works inside Slack, so you can ask questions of Looker right inside Slack and receive response based on data, based on the live data in the data lake, right there inside your chat application. So that's very, very powerful for someone who doesn't want to, close a window, open another window for an analytics environment, try and hunt down an answer, copy it and paste it back into that chat environment. And it's a very natural self-service way of getting at data, that just integrating the insights right into where people work, right into processes and tools that people already use. For example, also you can use Looker right inside SFDC, right? You can embed charts in there. You can make it so that if that's where people are working, that's where their workflow is, you can get it right there from a data that's directly extracted again from that data lake, data warehouse, with minimal delays in that data pipeline. Now you can also inject data right into workflows. We've had a couple of organizations we've been working with on delivery, and maybe they need a delivery person needs to know a better route to the next delivery drop-off point. We can push that data out to a mobile application, and it's so natural in those types of environments when you receive data like that. You may not even realize that what's going on is a data experience or that you're consuming data. It's just information you need to do your job right in the workflow, right in the way you're working. Very seamless, very native, very natural. And that's how we want to deliver data to our businesses to make the biggest difference. Last but not least is a custom data application, custom portal. Maybe your organization needs to deliver an application out to users, like a gaming company, and you want to put into that consumption information for the user or scores for the user of your application. You can push that right in as well with a modern data analytics environment like Looker. And so that data experience then becomes very valuable and even monetizable for the organization that's building a custom data application. What's key here for all four kinds of these new data experiences is that they're freed up by a simplification of the modern data stack. By not managing a transactional database, a data lake, a data warehouse, operational data stores, data marts, cubes, extracts, multiple analytics environments, and tons of ad hoc queries as a data team, you can now begin to rethink how you address business intelligence and analytics, and how you can go beyond reports and dashboards into an integrated insight or data-driven workflow or custom application world. And you can really drive considerable value once you've simplified and freed up that underlying capability of a modern, crisper, cleaner data stack. So Looker, obviously, the organization I work with, provides that modern analytics environment that works right on any SQL database so that you don't have to do heavyweight transformation as it moves into that data environment. So you can collect all your data, extract and load it into a database, whether that's a data lake or a data warehouse, maybe transform or clean data a little bit while it's there, but do the bulk of the transformation at the time of query using custom business logic and a semantic layer that's defined, and then deliver that data where and when it's needed to anyone who's going to consume it. And that's really the key. Shifting from a heavy infrastructure-focused world to an insights-driven world is the modern transformation that data teams need to make to provide the greatest value to the business. So Looker really is the platform for data experiences. We're now a part of Google Cloud, and we can provide secure access to real-time data where and when people need it and meet all of the requirements of these four new types of data experience. Because we're in database, we work directly with your data lake. We send queries right there, model the data that exists inside the data lake data warehouse, and then we present it out to users where it's most natural for them. And we hope you'll look more into Looker as well. Thank you very much for listening. And we appreciate you attending this event and listening to the talk. Thank you so much.